Thanks so much for joining me. In today's video, we'll be working on pruning back some reblooming perennials like nepeta, salvia, and balm. My goal is to get these cut back so that they'll bloom again for me later in the season. These were all blooming in mid-May through June and they looked amazing, but now it's time to give them a haircut so that they can bloom again for me later in the summer. First off, I'm working on the salvia that is just buzzing with bees. You can see that it's already started to reflush, but some of the old blooms are kind of marring their beauty, and I would like to make sure that I get all these old blooms off that I can so that I just have these new beautiful bright blooms showing. I'm just using my regular snips and then also putting any extras into this kangaroo pop-up bag. I don't have it popped all the way up yet because I don't need to, and I'll just trim off these pieces real quick and get them tidied up and show you guys what it looks like. Now, my salvia is not perfect, but I didn't want to sacrifice too many of my new blooms because the bees are just loving them. So I went ahead and took off what I could. If you started pruning your perennials like salvia before they had reflushed with blooms, just as the blooms were dying back, you could go ahead and take the plant down by at least a third, if not more, if you want to like really hardly prune it so that you can reshape it. But I just left my salvia a little bit long so that I could keep these new blooms that are coming on for the bees. The next thing that we're working on this morning is this bee balm or monarda. You can see behind me that it has started to kind of go over. It doesn't have any petals left, it's just these seed heads. And I'm using my hori knife today to work on this. I like to use this for larger perennials with lots of stems, so I don't have to individually cut each stem. And I like how it has a serrated edge so that I can just kind of hack things back. So I'll show you guys what that looks like, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. Alright, you can tell that this area still looks a little bit wild. I left some of it kind of tall. I really worked to make sure that the stems that especially had powdery mildew were taken out, and then those that had already bloomed. You can see that I did find one tiny bloom, so I'll leave that one, and I just kind of trimmed things up that were looking really leggy, and you can see here that this is the foliage from my drumstick alliums that's dying back. So this area is, like I said, it looks a little bit wild, but so much better without all of those spent blooms of that bee balm. The last thing that we're working on today is this nepeta, and like our salvia, it has already started to rebloom, but not quite as much. So I'm going to prune it a little bit harder, even though I'm sacrificing a few of the blooms, so that I can reshape it a bit and make sure that it looks tidy for the rest of the season. Even in this dim, cloudy light, you can see the difference between this one nepeta that I've done, which is not perfect, but is way less crisp looking than the ones next to it. And I have here 5 nepeta in a row, so I don't want to prune a ton in between them. You could shape them up so they all look like their own individual plants, but I want to make sure that the drift stays together. But what I'm working on is kind of pruning them up around other plants that they're close to, and pruning up the underneath that looks pretty leggy and brown. And like I said, just getting as much of the dead out as I can, not having to be perfect, but just trying to give them a little spruce up so that they don't look so dead as they rebloom. So the nepeta is not perfect, but it's looking much better, and I think that the butterflies approve. Just like with the salvia, if I had gotten to this earlier in the season, I could have cut down more of these plants, but because they were already starting to reflush, I didn't want to take away blooms from the pollinators. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this gives you inspiration to work in your own garden when it's not so hot out, hopefully when the cooler time in the day, in the morning or late evening. Thank you so much for growing along with me.